I think that Hollow Knight Silksong's healing system is better than Hollow Knight's, but it's kind of counterintuitive why, because Hollow Knight's system is in a lot of ways more satisfying and flexible to use, but I think it has some unintended consequences that force the game to be designed in a less interesting way, and I think a lot of Silksong's changes are there to specifically fix those issues. So we're going to get into why that is, but note that I'm not here to talk about the balancing of damage in the games. What I'm talking about here is mostly unrelated to the fact that so many enemies in Silksong do double damage. That's its own topic, but I think what I have to say about the design kind of stands true whether or not that's the case. So the basic idea behind both healing systems is that you have to hit enemies to get a resource that you use to heal. This is great because it incentivizes you to be active and attack. In both games, you run into situations where you're at low health and you have nothing to heal with, and instead of running away or giving up, you feel the need to lock in, play well, and keep hitting the enemy without getting hit in order to build back up the resource you need to heal and be more safe. Now in Hollow Knight, that resource is called Soul. In Silksong it's Silk, but they're the same thing. In Hollow Knight, if you hit an enemy 3 times, you get enough for 1 mask of damage to be healed, and you can store enough to heal 3 masks total. Now the cost of healing is not just in hitting enemies to build up Soul, but also in that it takes time and locks you into your place as you do it. This means that there's a level of commitment, and you have to be sure that you're safe there, that an enemy isn't going to hit you while you're doing it or else you'll lose the heal and take more damage. This gives Hollow Knight a really fun flow and some interesting decision making. The basic structure in a Hollow Knight boss fight is that the boss starts their animation telling you what attack is happening, you dodge it, hopefully, and then you have the choice of whether you want to attack them or heal. Attacking them, makes the fight end sooner and is less committal because you can just keep moving and it doesn't take as long, while healing, makes you safer, but it's also a commitment. You have to be sure that you have time to heal and sure that the position you're choosing to heal in is a safe one to do it in. But if you know that well, then you can just go for heals whenever you want, and often you might even have the time to go for 2 heals, which feels great, because it's greater risk, because the longer you take, the more likely they're going to hit you, but greater reward. Even though I have some criticisms of it, I think that Hollow Knight's healing system is overall great, and this is why, because you get to make those decisions. There are so many little nuances of which attack is coming next? Is that one that gives me time to heal? Am I making this decision fast enough? Am I confident that I know where is safe? And that feels great to think about. Now, Silksong changes this system a little, basically by making it so you can't heal one at a time. You have to build up 9 hits worth of Silk, basically, and then heal all at once, 3 masks. Now, the ratio of how many times you hit enemies to how much you heal is the same, but you lose that flexibility. What you gain is that your heal happens faster. You heal 3 masks in the time that it takes you to heal 1 in Hollow Knight, and that also you can do it mid-air and kind of hang there, which lets you dodge attacks going beneath you, which just generally feels good. I think Silksong's system helps the game feel faster. You don't have to take as long to heal and you go right back into the action. But the problem is you lose the flexibility. You can no longer just heal 1 when you take 1 damage. That'll waste all of your Silk because it could have healed 3. If you're at low health in Hollow Knight, you can just hit the enemy 3 times and then heal to be a little safer, but in Silksong you have to hit them 9 times and build up to full before you can get that heal. And you don't have that decision of trying to go for another heal if you think it's safe enough to, with all of that exciting risk-reward, because it takes basically your full Silk bar at the start of the game, so it's impossible for you to go for 2. So even though there's the advantages of it happening faster and happening mid-air, you could definitely argue that Silksong's feels worse because you lose the flexibility and because you don't seem to make as many interesting decisions. But I said that I think Silksong's is better, and I stand by that. And the reason for that is that Hollow Knight's healing system is too powerful. I talked in my last video about how Hollow Knight's money system is in an arms race with itself. You get too much money, so the game feels a need to make the costs get higher and higher to make up for how much you have, which can then lead to different forms of frustration or lack of engagement with the mechanics. The healing system is in a similar position. If you really know what you're doing, you can get so many heals off in Hollow Knight. You can basically be under 0 threat from all but the hardest bosses in the game because the opportunities to heal are everywhere. And a good player should be able to be under little threat from a boss, but they should be forced to do so in an interesting playstyle. I think it's great if practice means you can beat a boss without getting hit by them once, but the healing system makes it so you can also just keep wailing on a boss, hitting them over and over, taking damage when they hit you, and then just healing that off because you have the chances to. And I think that's a much less interesting playstyle that the healing system, by being so powerful, unfortunately kind of incentivizes. And I think that's actually part of why there's double damage in Silksong. It disincentivizes that bland playstyle where you just keep hitting the enemy and accept the damage you take by making that less cost-effective. So then what does Hollow Knight do to make up for how powerful healing is? Well, it makes it so the late game bosses, really the end game bosses, the hardest ones in the DLC, which are also the most interesting ones, way too fast. I mean, they're fast in fun ways where there's fast attacks to react to and know what to do against and you have to move fast, but they're also fast in that the gaps of time between one attack and another are really, really short. Against the hardest bosses in the game, if you dodge an attack and try to go for a heal while that attack is happening, their next attack is very likely to just spawn and target you before your heal is done, even if you're using quick focus to make your heals faster. And they need to be this way because if they gave you the time to heal, then they wouldn't be as hard as they're supposed to be. I don't think those bosses are too hard. I think the healing system, because it's so powerful, forces them to reach their level of difficulty in a less interesting way. Because when they play like this, first of all, they're just a lot more overwhelming. You rarely get a chance to breathe, which I think is a little much. I would rather them just be hard because the moves themselves are hard to dodge, but more importantly, it takes away the interesting decisions. When the option of healing is taken off the table against most of their attacks and your only real opportunity is when they're stunned, then you're no longer thinking, should I go for an attack after their attack, or should I back away to heal if I think I have time in a good position? You no longer even consider that. And it's still really exciting. They're still really fun bosses, where you have to think fast, move fast, and have a plan for every move that they have and how you're going to respond to it, but it is less complex in your internal decision making. But again, they need to be pushed in that direction because otherwise the healing system is just too powerful. And there is the option of using Shape of Un, which as a charm does let you open up more healing opportunities than you would have otherwise. And I appreciate that, I like using it, but one, it's a charm so it affects your build, and two, it's only in a few more places that you can get healing against those bosses. Plenty of places it still doesn't work. There's also the factor that Hollow Knight just lets you get a lot of soul. You have charms that increase your soul gain, you have Quick Slash to just let you attack more, which is fun and gives you more soul, and in general, I think Hollow Knight's bosses tend to have a lot of cases where you can kind of just wail on them. Not all of them, and it varies from which boss and which attack they're doing, but on average, you tend to just have times where you can sort of outspace them with Mark of Pride or just position yourself well and hit them like 4 or 5 times in a row, which again lets you build up a lot of soul. And I think having a lot of soul is a good thing in some ways because it encourages you to actually use your soul on spells, but a lot of players just don't even do that anyway. Now, all of these things are things that I think Silksong's healing system fixes. For starters, we're taking away those options that let you build up Silk faster. There's no Soul Eater equivalent, there's no Quick Slash equivalent. And importantly, I also just feel like Silksong's bosses are designed to have less of those opportunities to just wail on them. Like, I can't quantify this is just the vibe I got playing the game, but I feel like you usually can get like 1, maybe 2 attacks on a boss after you respond to their attack, which does mean that, you still build up Silk at a reasonable pace, but you don't just build up an insane amount that's then more than enough. And this means that unlike Hollow Knight, where you get a lot of soul and healing is often bottlenecked around your healing opportunities, which you either have more than enough of, or you're barely getting at all, Silksong actually bottlenecks your healing by your Silk. But the important part is that you can't greed multiple heals in a row, which is, yes, less flexible, but it also means that the game finally doesn't have to be stingy with how much time it gives you to heal. In Hollow Knight, if they aren't super fast, you can get all the heals you want. In Silksong, the game can actually give you time to breathe. It can have enough space between attacks that it isn't overwhelming and is more just challenging you to respond to the attacks themselves. When it wants a boss to be really hard, it gives you fast things to react to and understand how to respond to, but it still gives you time to breathe. It doesn't need to be stingy about the time it gives you out of fear that it might compromise the difficulty. And that means that even against the hardest bosses in Silksong, I am still getting to make those decisions. I am still thinking about, okay, I'm at low health, and I could just get an attack here, but maybe I feel safe jumping and getting a heal midair. Maybe I'm not in a safe position to do that, or I'm reacting too slow and I should wait to do it after the next attack. But that element stays there throughout the whole game, while Hollow Knight loses it against its bosses that are supposed to be the most interesting and challenging ones. I think against the hardest bosses in Silksong, I know for every one of their attacks how I should position myself and time it if I want to get a heal off of them, while against the hardest bosses in Hollow Knight, I know that against most of those attacks, I can't get the heal. I think that Silksong is able to feel like this specifically because the healing system was changed, because it was made less flexible and thus less powerful and thus less abusable. They aren't required to prevent you from abusing it to keep things difficult. Now, one other thing I wanted to address was how these systems affect spell usage. I think they're pretty similar in this regard. They both kind of have the problem that using your spells or, well, your silk skills kind of feels bad because you don't want to waste what could be your heals. I think Hollow Knight being more flexible kind of helps with that, but I also think Silksong kind of gets a cool feeling once you have enough space on your spool to have both a heal and a spell usage, because then it's like, okay, because my heal is concentrated into one, I'm comfortable using my spell now, knowing that I still have kind of a heal locked in that's ready in case I need it. But that's also kind of true in Hollow Knight, so I think it's more a subtle difference in feeling that I'm not entirely sure about yet. So I'm curious what anyone else thinks about that, and curious what anyone else thinks about the healing system, and if you think what I'm saying makes sense. Because personally, I know I definitely felt the difference between endgame Hollow Knight fights and endgame Silksong fights.